It is an incredible joy to be with you. Thank you so much. Reince, talking about a nerdathon. I'm a nerd guy too. If we're all into confessions tonight, I totally believe in the Republican cause. In fact, I started my journey as a Republican probably in 1964. I don't want to show my age, but I was 11 years old when I mounted an elephant with little George W., Neil and Marvin, and I don't know if Dara was alive yet, but she probably was, campaigning for my dad in 1964. My dad got the largest number of votes in 1964 and lost by 57-43, just for the record. Barry Goldwater lost Texas 72-28. So we've come a long way, baby. Particularly in Texas, where things have been a lot better. But I appreciate the fact that Reince Priebus and this committee, all of you, are focused on the important things. Not about making a point, but by building an organization that is possible for us to be successful going forward. I want to mention your great co-chairman as well. I appreciate her a lot, Sharon, for all the great work that you do. And Sharon has brought, as a surprise to me at least, until I saw the list of people coming, brought a brother from another mother, R.B. Holmes, a great pastor from Tallahassee, who I just love and respect. And thank you for being here, R.B. He's been a great friend. I appointed him chairman of the Florida A&M University, where he did a spectacular job. And it's important for us to recognize our friends who have done great work. R.B., I've never asked you if you're even a Republican. I hope you are. If you're not, there's always a chance for redemption. But it's a joy to have you here, for sure. And I just appreciate all the work that you do. If I'm going to run for President of the United States, which is my hope, I'm not a candidate yet. I'm in the process of thinking about this. I know that I'm going to have to get beyond being George H.W. Bush's son and Barbara's son, for which I'm really proud. And I'm going to get beyond being George W.'s brother, for which I am extraordinarily proud as well. I love them all. Hard for me to there's this, there's a lot of people out there from the press, and there's a lot of interest in finding the ways that we're different and all this. Look, the simple fact is that we're all on our own life's journey. My brothers and sister are different than me, but I'm not going to go out of my way to say that, my brother did this wrong or my dad did this wrong. It's just not going to happen. I have a hard time with that. I love my family a lot. But having said that, I know for a fact I'm going to have to show my heart, show who I am, tell my life story so people know that I'm doing this for the right reason. And so I'm going to give you a little thumbnail sketch of the life of John Ellis Bush, a.k.a. Jeb. I began life in Midland, Texas, where I woke up and there she was, Barbara Bush. I won the lottery, for sure. I definitely won the lottery. But my life was transformed when I was 17 years old, where I met Columba Garnica de Gallo in León, Mexico. I met her on a Sunday afternoon. I'll never forget. I think it was about 5 o'clock, and it was love at first sight. Most of the guys in the room have no clue what this means. Sometimes the women get a sense of how this works. I fell in love at first sight. I'm not kidding. It was like some transformational event. Lightning struck. I lost 20 pounds, and back then, trust me, I didn't have 20 pounds to lose. I was a string bean. I couldn't sleep. I was totally consumed by this beautiful woman, and I made up my mind that I was going to marry her, and I was going to live my life with her. And it worked. Unfortunately for me, she didn't fall in love at first sight, so I had to develop some skills to convince her of the same feeling that I had, and thankfully I did, and we got married in the Newman Catholic Center at the University of Texas 10 days after I turned 21 and she was 20, and because of her, I got out of the University of Texas in 2 years, and because of her, I've always worked. I've never taken more than a week off of my life, and I give my wife credit for giving my life a purpose and meaning that has driven me to do whatever I've done, and I'm proud of her, and I love her very much. We have 3 beautiful children. Everybody's proud of their kids. Jeb Jr. is my former partner. Now that I've burned all the bridges behind me, he's no longer my partner, but he lives in my same zip code, and he has two beautiful granddaughters. I call them granddaughters. He probably calls them daughters. And he's married to Sandra Al-Gadadi Bush, who's a beautiful girl from Canada that hopefully will become an American citizen as soon as our confounding immigration system gets a little more efficient. And he's important to me. My daughter Noelle is my precious daughter. She lives in Orlando. And my son George is a statewide elected official in Texas, where he won with 62% of the vote last time, and I'm proud of him. I'm proud of his extraordinarily competent and beautiful wife, Mandy, and the two grandsons that exist in their family. I'm proud of George because at the age of 30, more or less, he decided to go serve in the military as well. Like a lot of people did, to be able to keep us safe and to be able to show their support. He did it, and he was a naval intelligence officer. He served in Afghanistan. I'm proud of his service, and I'm proud of the service. I'm proud of the service of every man and woman and their families that have served in the military to keep us free. We moved to Miami, and I did something. Fasten your seatbelts here for some. This will be really this will be really kind of a radical idea. But I did something that people in Washington have no clue about these days, at least in the Obama administration. I've signed the front side of a paycheck. Now think about that. That's a really extraordinary experience. I started a business with a guy named Armando Cudina and Lourdes, basically, all three of us, and we built a business that started with 3 people, and it became the largest full-service commercial real estate company in South Florida. And that experience is far more powerful and far more important than people in Washington give it credit for, because it's the heartbeat of our country. It truly is. To be able to take risks, to learn from mistakes, to dust yourself off, to figure out how to make things better, to build a business so that other people can be successful. And by the way, what happens when you do that is some people leave because they want to be the CEO of the business, and they create their own business, and some of them succeed and some of them fail. That's America. That's the America we need to restore. The America that is always striving to rise up. And there are a lot of people that can talk about this. There are very few people actually in public life, particularly in Washington, D.C., particularly this president and his team, that have any clue about how this works. So it shouldn't be a surprise that every time they have an impulse, it's to create another rule, to create another tax, to create another complication, to say that they're too smart. You just get in line and do what you're told. I believe the exact opposite should be the way we go. And I've done it. It's in my DNA. It's how I've been successful in my life. It's to take risks and to not try to regulate and mandate and to control everything, but just unleash the American animal spirits in this country and make sure that more and more, that everybody has a chance to rise up. And in Miami, I had a chance to do that. And that's an experience I brought to bear when I got elected as governor. A state that is not a red state per se, although we overperform, I have to admit. It's a purple state. There are 500,000 more Democrats than Republicans. It's a big state. It's a state with a lot of people moving in and a lot of people moving out. It's a state that watches these things with their peripheral vision. Governor, it's kind of like Arizona. It's kind of like Arizona. It's a state that's in its ascendancy in many ways because it is growing still. But it's not necessarily a conservative state. And I took conservative principles. First of all, I said what I was going to do when I was a candidate. I took conservative principles and I applied them so that more and more people had a better life. And compare that to Washington, D.C., where Barack Obama, for the last 6 years, has raised $1 trillion of taxes to pay for Obamacare and $600 billion of additional taxes over 10 years. Compare that to the record in Florida where we cut taxes by $19 billion. And by the way, we don't have an income tax to cut. In Washington, the president has almost doubled the federal debt. It now totals $18 trillion. And Washington, amazingly, has lost its AA bond-rated status. Imagine that. Compare that to Florida, where they called me Veto Corleone, because I vetoed over 2,000 separate line items totaling more than $2 billion to bring structure and discipline to our budget, where our budget reserves went from $1 billion to close to $10 billion over my 8 years, and where we reduced the government workforce by 13,000 people, more than 10%, and Florida went from AA status, and we were the only state during my 8 years to go to AAA status, higher credit rating than our federal government. It can happen if you apply conservative principles the right way. Under President Obama, in the sixth year now of a recovery, we have the most tepid economic growth we've ever had in modern history. 2% growth, which makes it impossible for people to rise up. And the net result is workforce participation is lower than it was in 1980. We now have a situation where there are more business failures than business startups. Imagine what the future looks like if we stay on this course, where everybody feels compelled to get in line rather than to dream of the biggest possible dreams to create the disruptions and the innovations that will create higher income for all of us. In the world of the president, we now have not only workforce participation low, but 5 million more people in poverty. And as Republicans, we should be concerned about that. We should make sure that we're for those that want to rise up. We should never believe that people in poverty want to stay there, because it's not true. And if we're going to win elections, we better be on the side of people that want to have the chance to achieve earned success. And it will not happen at 2% growth. It will not happen with policies that make it impossible for us to grow more. Compare that to Florida, where during my 8 years, the economy grew by 4.4%. Personal income grew by a similar kind of amount. The state government grew by significantly less. And we created, we being the people of Florida, not the government or the governor, 1.3 million net new jobs during those 8 years, more than any state other than California. Family income in the last 6 years has declined in this recovery by $2,100. Family income in Florida grew by a similar amount. So you tell me which policy is the better policy, one that believes in limited government and the aspirations of people to achieve earned success, or the progressive agenda that says more government, more taxation, more regulation is the path to go. It's up to us now to convince those that haven't actually heard the conservative message that we're the party that will give them hope to be able to rise up. Because our policies are the right ones, theirs have failed. And by the way, I had a chance to govern not just on economic policy, but a lot of other policies as well. I'm proud of the fact, I got a lot of ratings when I was governors, all governors do. I'm proud of the fact that every year I got an A+ rating from the NRA, because every part of the Bill of Rights is important to protect. You can't pick and choose which ones you like. I also had a chance to act on my core beliefs, which is the most vulnerable in our society are deserving of being in the front of the line. I don't know why it is that those that create kind of the scorecard in politics say that conservatives don't care about people. It's not true. Conservatives generally are the ones that act on their hearts. They're the ones that volunteer. They're the ones that act on their conscience. But also conservatives, if they're correct, based on their own beliefs, put the most vulnerable in society in the front of the line, not in the back of the line. We're going to win if we show our heart. And in Florida, I had a chance to do that. The developmentally disabled, our child welfare system, people that had no hope other than to receive a compassionate hug from people by mobilizing the support of volunteers and support from government. You can believe in limited government and shift the priorities towards the most vulnerable in our society to allow them to rise up as well. And I'm proud of the fact I did that. I'm not embarrassed about it at all. So imagine a Washington that has that kind of philosophy, instead of the philosophy of politicizing everything, a philosophy that politicizes the IRS of all things, a philosophy that uses the powers of the executive branch and then takes that to the next step and the next step and the next step after that. That policy is creating so much doubt and so much division in our country that we're never going to be able to fix a few big complex things. But if we get rid of that philosophy and restore the traditional philosophy of limited government and respect for the Constitution, this is the most extraordinary time to be alive in our country's history. The amount of innovation and disruption that's going to create times of abundance is there for us to take. But we have to fix how we tax. We have to fix how we regulate. We have to fix a broken immigration system and fix it so that we create an economic driver for high sustained economic growth. We have to fix our entitlement system, and we have to embrace our energy revolution. If we do those things, all of which are within our grasp, this will be the most extraordinary time to be alive. The other thing that we have to do to assure that we're going to have high sustained economic growth is to be able to recognize, and this president is unable to do so, that America's presence in the world is not a force for bad things happening. America's presence in the world is a force for good, a force for security, a force for peace. It used to be a bipartisan consensus that America's engagement in the world actually created security and peace, and it lessened the chance of having our men and women in uniform to go in harm's way. That's what we need to restore. This president honestly believes that America's power is not a force for good, and so he's withdrawn from the world. We're now part of the community of nations. We're now leading from behind. We're now grandiose, with grandiosity talking about red lines and then never fulfilling them. We're creating so much uncertainty and doubt that one of our strongest allies for the last 50 years, Saudi Arabia, their king doesn't even come to Camp David when invited. We're now creating so much insecurity that Israel no longer doubts whether the United States is going to have their back. And the net result, whether it's in Europe or Asia or Latin America or the Middle East, is an incredibly uncertain world where we have new asymmetric threats, barbaric threats, Islamic terrorist threats that now challenge the security of our own country. Restoring America's presence in the world where our word is our bond with our friends and our enemies fear us once again has to be the highest priority for the next president of the United States. The way I look at this, and to simplify this a bit, is, but for us who? Think about it that way. But for us who? Think of the Christian cops on the shores, I don't know if you saw the YouTube, near Benghazi, being beheaded, where they were saying the Lord's Prayer. But for us who? Think of the Christian students in Kenya being killed because of their faith, separated from the Muslim students to be shot and murdered. But for us who? Think of the Christian girls in Nigeria captured by Boko Haram. But for us who? Think of the most ancient Christian communities in Iraq and in Syria. Who's going to stand for them, the most helpless in the Middle East? But for us who? Think of the Jews now being discriminated against as it was similar to pre-World War II in Europe. But for us who? The United States has a role to play in this world that goes beyond just security. We have a role to play to embrace and support the values that are right. And we must do so. And we need to stand on behalf of the most vulnerable around the world as well. If we do these things, we will gain the respect of people all around the world, and we'll create a safer, more secure world as well. We have a duty and an obligation to do it, not just because we're Americans, but because it's in our security interest to do so as well. I hope you believe that, and I hope this campaign is about that as well. I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who, and then I'm going to close. I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who I've become friends with, who I didn't know at the time. Her name is Denisha Merriweather. Denisha is now an adult, but Denisha is quite similar to a lot of people in America, not just in Florida, but around this country, that we've cast aside because we have an education system focused on the economic interest of adults rather than assuring that the God-given ability of every child to learn takes place. That's the fact in America. A third of our kids are college and or career ready after we spend more per student than any country in the world other than Luxembourg and a couple other rounding errors, to be honest with you. It's a tragedy, but no one's marching in the street for the future Denishas. In Florida, we changed the path for a lot of kids because we created voucher programs, corporate tax scholarship programs, programs for the developmentally disabled, programs for kids with learning disabilities to allow their parents to go to any school, including private schools. We have the most ambitious school choice programs of any state, I believe, in the country. We eliminated social promotion in third grade, this insidious policy that functionally illiterate kids get passed along as though there's no big deal. There's a huge deal. The learning gaps start that early, and they never are overcome. If you don't really care about kids, fine, but I know that everybody in this room does, and most people do. But no one has taken on this challenge of fixing this. But in Florida, we did. And so Denisha went to a public school. She came from a family that was broken in many ways. Her mom didn't graduate from high school. Her brother didn't graduate from high school. She was from Jacksonville. She moved around because they were living month to month, written one place to the next. It's very common in America today. Very common. We may not see it in our own lives, but trust me, it's there. And Denisha got her godmother. Her godmother told her that there was a school that she could go to, a private school, paid for by the state, and she went there. And it was a blessing. This young woman who had been held back 2 years, gained in 1 year's time, gained one of those years back. There was discipline in her life. She knew for the first time that she was smart because she was told over and over again in ways that no one really seemed to care about that she was stupid, because that's how we do it now. That's how we roll in the United States. That's our education system. Some kids can learn and some kids can't. That's not the way it really works. Every kid has a God-given ability to learn. And she was the first in her family to graduate from high school, in her immediate family, and she was the first in her extended family to graduate from college. In Florida, there are 230,000 kids that are now reading at grade level because we had accountability and school choice and higher standards, and we made it a high priority. Now, I'm not saying that Washington should have anything to do with this. In fact, I would urge all of you to go to your leaders, your senators, and your congressmen to make sure that that's the case. There should be nothing to do with Washington about this, but this should be our highest priority, to assure that every child has a chance to be able to achieve their dreams, to make it their dreams about achieving earned success. And I know that we can do this because we did it in Florida. And the rest of the country can do it with the proper leadership in Washington, D.C. as well. So let me conclude by saying, I'm on the side of Denisha. I'm on the side of people that have been left behind. Because they're Republicans, they just don't know it yet. They're conservatives, they want to be conservatives, they've never been asked. I know from Reince that we want to win. He tells me every day. He's organizing a plan to win. I know from you all that you want to win. The only way that we can restore the greatness of this country is to win. So how are we going to do that? We need to fight hard and push back when we get attacked. I'm all in on that, trust me. I'm a competitive guy in a competitive family. I know how to do that. Doing that is important. But we also we need to show our heart. We need to be hopeful and optimistic. We need to challenge every basic assumption about the things that are wrong in this country and guarantee people that if you elect Republicans to Congress, to the Senate, and to the presidency, that we'll fix these things, not just for those that have already made it, but more importantly, a lot more importantly, for those that aspire to make it. If we do those things and we fight hard, we're going to win. If we go back to the old way of fighting amongst ourselves and saying, well, you're not righteous enough, you're not perfect enough, you're not this enough, we're not going to win. But we can win, and if we do, if we win, and if we're true to our beliefs, and we have the leadership skills to fix these big, complex things, this is the greatest time to be alive as an American. This is the most extraordinary time to be an American. I hope you believe that in your heart, in your soul, in your mind, and I hope that you work as hard as you can to make it so. God bless you for what you do. I look forward to being with you.